This is Julio's Corner, my corner of the internet where I talk about whatever is on my mind. It's usually media that I've watched, read, or listened to, but you never know. In this episode, we're going to talk about de-corporatizing my digital media and about Farscape. This episode is being recorded on Sunday, May 3rd, 2026. And welcome back. So let's get right into all of this. I think I wrote a bit of a script to keep me on track because de-corporatizing my media is a bit of a heady topic, and I can easily go off tangent here. So let me go over my show notes real quick so I can be focused. So as you know, my opinion is that capitalism is the bane of humanity. It devalues all aspects of society into a profit and loss ledger. Because of this, you are seeing the cracks in American society at large as fascism is slowly taking control, and there is finally an uptick in voices of discontent at the economic disparity between the haves and the have-nots. But let's zoom in on a particular aspect of this corruption or corrosion that's being caused by capitalism. And that's regarding consumer ownership. Now, before the days of digital media, one would buy their TV shows, movies, music, audiobooks, books, etc. in physical form. I myself had loads of said content. However, I moved around a lot in my early 20s and 30s, and lugging all that content has been and was cumbersome. Now around the mid-2000s or so, digital content was becoming popular. Ebooks, MP3s, video on demand, VODs, started becoming more appealing to me in lieu of hard copies because of their convenience in regards to moving. Even Netflix started their streaming service around 2007 when DVD rentals were still in the mainstream and will still peak. Blockbuster Video obviously was still around. Netflix had their DVD mailing service. But they started their streaming service, which now is like the biggest streaming service of all. Anyways, even during this infancy, these early stages of digital media, there were dissenting voices about switching to digital because of the way the legalese behind it was written. Basically, when you buy an ebook, a digital movie, or TV show, you are licensing that product. Based on the legalese, you are licensing that product. You do not own a copy of it. On top of that, there is DRM on the file. DRM is known as Digital Rights Management, and it is baked into the digital copy, which locks it down to the platform that you paid money to for that license copy. So if you buy an ebook on Amazon, it's locked down to the Kindle platform and service, and you can only read said ebook on a Kindle device or the apps on your smartphone, computer, etc. Same thing, if you buy a movie or a TV show in iTunes, now Apple Plus or whatever that app is called now, or Amazon or Vudu, now known as Fandango, and so on. And on top of that, because it's a license and not a copy, it can disappear without notice at any time. The corporations, of course, dissuaded those concerns in this infancy period, saying, It does say that in writing that we can at any point without notice remove it from your library or so on, but that's just for legal purposes. Don't worry about that writing. It's just for legal purposes. And so for 2 decades or so, because 2007, we're now in 2026. This really hasn't been an issue. However, things are changing. There are fewer and fewer options as media conglomerates keep merging, prices keep going up with less competition. And in some cases, there have been people complaining about their digital media collections being tampered with by their respective platforms. People noticing their Disney movies no longer in the libraries in their Amazon accounts or iTunes account, etc. Which brings me to today's episode and my decision to start untethering my media collection from these companies. Because I don't want to wake up one day and discover I can't access the media I spent my money on. So I started this week by using Libation, an open source software, to download my audiobooks from Audible and removing the DRM from my files and making it available in any platform I wish to listen to them from this point forward. I also decided to convert them to MP3 from lossless because that will also shrink down the size of the files, thereby making it easier to save and store because I only have so much data around in my hard drives. I am planning the following week to de-Kindle as many of my ebooks that I can, as well as unlock my Kindle reader so I can use it as an open platform, open source device. And my next my next ebook reader will probably eventually become the Kobo because that's getting a lot of good reviews. And again, I just want to, I'm tired of using Audible or Amazon. And now Bezos is just, as with capitalism, he's like one of the stalwart pillars that is emblematic of the corrosion of our society. Him owning the Met Gala and whatnot. But anyway, here I am going off script. After that, I am going to go through my movie and TV show library on iTunes / Apple and Fandango, which was formerly Vudu, and see if I can get some DRM-free copies of said content, so that way I have a contingency plan for whenever those movies and TV shows are somehow no longer available in my copies, my licenses are no longer available to me. The last thing I'm going to try to save is my digital music library. As I mentioned, I used to have physical media. Well, I had tons of CDs, and I had all of my CDs saved on my iTunes on my computer back in the day. Prior to using Apple Music streaming service, which was formerly Beats Music, which was formerly Mog, around this infancy period, iTunes or Apple had a service called iTunes Match, which allowed you to back up your music to the cloud with unlimited storage for an annual fee. So I did that, and yeah, everything was funky, was hunky dory until Apple Music came around and merged my library with theirs, thereby making it discernible for me to separate my collection from their millions and millions of licenses of music that they have in the streaming service that I pay a monthly fee to. So I'm not sure if it's possible for me to separate my library from theirs at this point in time. I may be resigned to just either sticking with Apple Music in this case, or just starting from scratch. I'm still on the fence about that. That's why that's going to be the last thing I tackle. So already fixed my Audible collection. Next will be the ebooks. Third will be my movies and TV shows. And finally, my my music collection. And I don't care if it'll be in MP3 format or Apple lossless. At the time, it was MP3 when I had them saved. And at 49, my ears aren't up to audiophile standards anyway, so I won't be able to tell the difference between perfect lossless quality or a decent bitrate MP3 format. Anyway, I pretty much kept almost verbatim with my script, a little ad-libbing here and there. I will see in post how decent that sounds, how seamless it may or may not come off. Anyways, let's move on to Farscape. So, since the last episode, I've been feeling nostalgic for, well, I mean, as you can tell from the last episode and previous episodes talking about the early days of podcasting and getting back into podcasting and listening to podcasts. I've also was a fan of, when I was talking about the different podcasts that I listened to, there were also two podcasts that I was a fan of back in the day of shows that I was a fan of. So these were like fan-based podcasts. One of them was called The Signal, which was a fan podcast about Firefly. And the other one was The Scapecast, which was a podcast about Farscape, which is my all-time favorite sci-fi show. So, in recent weeks, Nathan Fillion, who has a podcast that I listen to now called Once We Were Spacemen with Alan Tudyk, both of them were on Firefly, obviously. In one of their more recent episodes, they made an announcement that there will be new Firefly content in the near future. It will be an animated series set in time between the show ending, when the show, the last episode of the show and the movie. So in between that, I believe it's a month span, a couple of months of time lapse between the movie and the show in terms of the timeline of the series. The animated series is going to be set in between that. So that made me start. It started bringing up the nostalgia in me, and I started looking around for The Signal and for the Scapecast. I did see that The Signal is still available online. It's been archived, so I can listen to those episodes at my leisure. For the moment, at least, they're still safe online. However, the Scapecast is pretty much defunct. The hosts of that show, apparently, I guess they stopped paying for hosting fees. So there are a good amount of episodes still available, I think on YouTube or somewhere online. I saw them, but it's not the full show. It's not all the seasons of Scapecast, which was sad to see that it got abandoned. So there are some episodes available, maybe a few hundred, but not all of them. So that was unfortunate. The Signal still available. Now, despite that, I did find another Farscape fan-based podcast called So Farscape, which apparently came out like 6 years ago, 2000. Hold on, it came out in 2020. So 6 years ago. They, these two guys, whose names, I wrote them down somewhere, Kaki and Kay. I think they're both Australian because they sound Australian, which is perfect since the show was filmed in Australia. They had a lot of cast members that were Australian, except for the main guy who's American, Ben Browder, who plays John Crichton. So their podcast, Kaki and Kay's podcast, So Farscape with an exclamation point, is a new podcast that I'm listening to. And I'm watching Farscape as I am listening to their show episodically, because the premise, essentially, of So Farscape is that one of the hosts, I think it's Kaki, he is like myself, a big fan of the show. And Kay is watching the show for the first time. So it's a nice combination of one fan of this beloved franchise, introducing it to his friend who's never seen the show, but is definitely a fan of sci-fi, because he makes a lot of in their commentary. They both bally around a lot of sci-fi references, from Buck Rogers to the Red Dwarf to shows I've never heard of. I think one was called 7 Days. Apparently, that might have been a really short-lived show. They mentioned Doctor Who at one point. So it's been fun listening to their episodes along as a companion podcast to the show that I'm a huge fan, that I watch I've lost count of how many times I've watched the show myself since, like, again, it's my favorite sci-fi show of all time. But yeah, I am now reliving my nostalgia with these one fellow fan and a friend that he's introducing the show to. And as you know, I'm sure I mentioned in previous podcasts, I like to listen on YouTube. I do watch a lot of reaction videos to like songs or anime or things that people react to that I also enjoy, whether it be a song or a movie or a cartoon or whatever. So this show, in that same vein, tickles that funny bone of mine, that itch. It scratches that itch of mine for reaction videos in an audio sense, because it's an audio podcast, and so I get to enjoy in the fun of reliving the show with a fellow fan and seeing it with fresh eyes from the person who's never seen it before, and seeing how they enjoy it, what they catch that I didn't catch the first time, how much they like it in comparison to me, or what are they more critical of, and so on. And yeah, that's been a fun experience thus far. And wow, I went a lot faster than I thought I would go. But here we are. Oh, I forgot to go over some retractions and corrections in the very beginning of my show. So I guess I'll throw this in now at the end, and I'll have to refix the order. So anyway, I do have some retractions and corrections from the previous episode. I mentioned this show on Dropout TV that I'm currently watching, a role-playing game show called, I was calling it The Badlands. I was wrong. It's actually called Gladlands, which makes more sense because it is a dystopic setting, but everyone is trying to help each other, keep each other's spirits up and live in harmony with one another. So that's why it is the Gladlands versus Badlands, which would be the opposite. I was right about that senator from New Jersey. His name is Cory Booker, so correct about that. The guy who I was thinking of from CNN, his name is Van Jones, not Vance, but Van Jones. And of course, in the last episode, I was talking about the corporate hysteria regarding Hassan Piker. Well, there's actually a site, I'll put the link in the show notes. There's this site that is tracking the ops, the media ops on Hassan Piker, and it is insane to see how much focus this man is getting from Fox News, from from Israeli propaganda media, based media, from corporate media, of course, from paid shills, to try to demonize this man and make him into a social pariah. And I don't think it's really doing a good job, because it's only making it, like I said, it's having the Barbra Streisand effect, and it's in fact making him more popular, and more people are asking to either be on his show or have him come to their rallies to help push their primary campaigns. He just had this woman who's running for Congress in Denver, in Denver, Colorado. I forget if it's for Congress or for senatorship, but she was on his show. What was her name? She's Ethiopian, and I just watched it. Oh yeah, her name is Melat Kiros, Melatkiros, for Congress. So she's running for congressman for Denver, Colorado. So yeah, all these media attacks are not having the intended effect that they want, which is to make him a social pariah, to ostracize him, and to scare away young, progressive-minded politicians who want to be the new face of the Democratic Party and want to take over the Democratic Party via the primaries. Even though on top of corporate media, corporate Democrats trying to keep them down, Republicans also doing other illegal actions to suppress the vote, like what happened in, was it Virginia? Yeah, it was Virginia. The Supreme Court of Virginia knocked down the vote that gave permission to to redistrict that area in a more Democrat-friendly way versus Republican. So that's insane that, the country we live in, Republican-led areas in the country, like Texas and so on, they're able to forcibly change the laws to redistrict their areas to be more red and to suppress the vote. But then you have more blue state or purple states that try to do it the legal way and actually have the people voted in. And then the Supreme Court's like, nah, we're good. We don't care about what you have to say. Your vote doesn't really matter. We want you not to vote, actually. And we're going to just let Republicans vote. So too bad, so sad, sucks to be you. That is essentially what's happening. And it's just insane that this is the country we live in. So yeah, the best way we can fight is at least try to win these primaries for the Democratic nominations around the country and get more progressive-leaning candidates to give us a fighting chance in these already red-leaning areas and purple-leaning and other areas that are being forcefully turned red by the leaders in those areas versus democratically, which is illegal. But in this bizarre, upside down, topsy-turvy world we live in, what they're doing is legal because they have the authority to do so, which is insane. But we live in a fascist country now, so fascism is on the rise and doing what fascism does, which is suppress the vote, suppress the rights and voices of the people and the masses. I think those are the retractions and corrections I had. I mentioned Hassan. And yeah, now I'm done with everything in my show notes. And that wraps up the show. If you have any questions, comments, or any thoughts you'd like to share, you can reach me by clicking on the Contact Me link in the show notes. If you're feeling extra generous, you can click on the donate link in the show notes and send some dollars my way. This show is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International License. This means you can share this audio, remix it, do whatever you want, just say where you got it from. And as always, thanks for listening.